There might not be a cause of death, but Susan's clothes told a story that reinforced a mother's instinct.
We found that Susan's underwear, briefs and tights were missing, and a brassiere was missing. We now know that paedophiles take these things away as trophies because they get some sort of satisfaction from that. But this was ridiculed by the senior detectives at the yard, who thought that I was straying into an area that I couldn't prove.
At the inquest, an open verdict was recorded. The missing underwear was explained as the work of animals, even though Susan was found still wearing her overcoat.
She always used to wear one pair of tights, a pair of pants, and another pair of tights on top of that. So where were all those gone? At the inquest, they said it must have been an animal, so I said, yes, the only animal must have been a man.
Nipper Read ordered an experiment based on the post-mortem pictures of the trousers Susan had been wearing. He hoped the results would convince Scotland Yard there was a child killer on the loose.
Susan's trousers were found over the bodies, and the trousers were what I called kippered, torn in such a fashion that they became one piece. Now, all the people at the yard said that this was the result of animals. I couldn't accept that, and I didn't accept that. And so I got 12 pairs of these trousers. I got the biggest, strongest guys in the squad to try to tear them manually. They couldn't do it. But I found that if I put these on a young, slim detective, I found that then by grasping them at the crotch and the waist and pulling them sharply, this combined with his weight pulling the other way, tore them exactly as these trousers were in fact torn. And that's what I think had happened.
You think really what those two children must have felt, and this is something I shall never forget, is that when she died, there was nobody there to help her, which is something that we all can have. But those two children had nobody to hold their hand when they died.
Nipper Read made one final attempt to classify the case as murder, despite the lack of hard evidence. But he felt he was up against the politics of policing, a reluctance at the yard to have the clear-up rate spoiled by two unsolved murders.
Eventually we had a big conference at Scotland Yard, and the pathologist said that the children were in such a way in their embrace that you couldn't introduce a third party. The senior detective officers from the yard didn't argue that case at all. They said this couldn't be a murder because you couldn't prove a cause of death. And that being the case, they were satisfied to say, well, we can write that one off and leave it at that.
It was all forgotten when the papers couldn't keep it in, and Mr. Read tried desperately, but they weren't allowed any more money to keep the case going. It was like we was forgotten. Once it was over and the children were found and they were buried, it seemed like that's an end to it.
The Babes in the Wood never became a murder inquiry, and without that protection, all the physical evidence was destroyed. The Hanlon and Blatchford families have spent the last 30 years gently insisting to the many who recall the case that their children did not die of the cold.
When I did my final report, I said very emphatically that I was satisfied that it was murder, but it's most unlikely that it will ever be resolved. I didn't know that 30 years later somebody was going to come forward and confess.
In May 1996, a call from the top security wing of Wakefield Prison was patched through to the Met's major investigation squad for northeast London. The call came from 58-year-old Ronald Jebson, who was serving a life sentence. He said he had new information regarding the Babes in the Wood case.
Jebson was a convicted murderer. He had been convicted in 1974 of murdering an 8-year-old child. Prior to that, he had served prison sentences for buggery, indecent assault on a 6-year-old child, and also another indecent assault on a 4-year-old child back in the mid-50s.
Declan's team spent the next 2.5 years investigating Jebson's sex crimes. He described himself as a monster, fashioned from his own sufferings of child abuse. But as the police soon discovered, Jebson and the truth had long since parted company.
What we hoped for was a fairly simple, open and shut case, that this man Jebson was actually going to tell us that he had killed these 2 children, Susan and Gary. But what he told us was that 2 other people were actually responsible for the deaths of these 2 children. And he named those people as Robert Papper and Maureen Papper, implicating both of those parents in a double murder.
But there was a bitter twist to Jebson's allegation. He was in jail for the murder of the Pappers' 8-year-old daughter, Rosemary. The police began to suspect that Jebson's real motive in talking to them was a twisted desire for revenge.
What is it you want to get off your conscience, Ron?
I know they were murdered by Bob and Maureen in my car. Raped and buggered, taken out and dumped.
You are making, well, the most serious allegations you can make against someone.
Of course.
Not, child murders against the parents of your victim.
True.
Why wait 22 years before you call us?
I'll tell you why. You ain't gonna believe it.
Try me.
Neither of you will believe it.
Well, try us.
Right, I will try. I have got a conscience.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people ain't out there. And I keep thinking, what an evil bastard I am, and what evil bastards are stood out there walking the streets.
No one more than this man knows just how evil Jebson was. He grew up with him, and Jebson murdered his daughter. There was no easy way for the police to deal with the allegation that Robert Papper had killed the Babes in the Wood, even though it came from the man who murdered his daughter. Robert was DNA tested and questioned under caution. Then he learned the name of his accuser.
Jebson killed my daughter, destroyed me first marriage, destroyed me second marriage, accused me of murder of the Babes in the Wood. He couldn't make that stick. So then he decided he was going to make allegations about me interfering with my other 2 daughters. His allegations are fragments of his imagination. I mean, for me, what he's done to my life, you can't put words to.
When the Babes in the Wood disappeared, Jebson was lodging with the Pappers and their 6 children. Robert's first wife, family, and long-lost neighbors were all quizzed by the police to see if there was any truth in Jebson's accusation of child abuse and murder.
No one supported anything that he had actually said at all. It just gave the whole lie to what this evil man had constructed in his own mind, and for probably his own gratification as well.
Jebson was an adopted child and a classic loner. He was twice rejected by the army and claimed to work as a chauffeur. On the afternoon the Babes in the Wood vanished, he was at the job centre in Enfield. His alibi was checked at the time and accepted by the police.
There was nothing in my inquiry that connected Jebson in any possible way at all. Nobody had seen him putting them into a motor car or inviting them into it or speaking to them in the road or anything of that kind. The children just disappeared. The word paedophile was something that I'd never heard of, and it wasn't a common word at that time, nor was the fact that there were people like that that were predators that preyed upon young children.
4 days after Gary and Susan disappeared, Jebson was arrested for indecently assaulting an 11-year-old boy in woods near Nottingham. He was again questioned about the Enfield killings, but denied any involvement. He was jailed for 5 years, but released after 3, and went back to lodge with the Pappers. For a second time, Jebson kept secret from the family that he'd been in jail for indecent assault on a child. And once again, Jebson went to live in the Pappers' Hatfield home.
He seemed a bit more shifty. You know, he didn't want to sort of associate with anybody, he just wanted to stay on his own. We thought he was a queer, actually, because he was never with women, and he'd never go with women, you know. But Maureen at the time, that was my first wife. She says, I don't like him. There's something about him I just don't like. I said, well, you know, I went to school with a guy, I said, put a bit of trust in him, I suppose. And he still bought sweets for the children and whatever. Tried to get very close to Rosemary. And I think that's when Maureen said he's got to go. We've had a few choice words from him, said, I'll get even with you anyway. Rosemary went missing. I went into the classroom and I said, where's Rosemary, right? And they said, oh, she's been picked up. I said, by whom? She said, by Uncle Ron. I said, she ain't got a bloody Uncle Ron.
Could have been any other little girl from that school. And who comes out of the alleyway? Little Rosemary. Hello, Uncle Ronnie. You want a ride? Oh, yes, please. And we're driving away. I put my hand in her lap. No, you mustn't. She edged away, so I pulled her to us. I said, get her off, I'm going to hurt you.
You're going to what?
Hurt her. Because I'm oversexed. And I'm wanting it bad. And I'm not going to give a damn how I get it.
Jebson bought 8-year-old Rosemary Papper a bag of sweets, and then took her to a birdwatcher's hide in woods near Welland, where he raped and strangled her.
I says to her, Scrib, I don't want you. I said, Scrib, I've got undressed. She said, right, lie down. No. And she rolls on her belly. I tried to turn her over. She won't do, so I give her a couple of slaps. Still won't move. I said, right, now you're going to have it. She screamed, she cried. I slapped her. Didn't like it. After I spent myself, I sat up and she turned around and looked over her shoulder. And by then I was slank.
Oh, you blame her for that? Didn't
Yeah, I'm blaming her for it. I said, now look what you've done.
This is the moment when psychologists say abuse escalates to murder. The fantasy fails, the abuser's sexual inadequacies are exposed, and a lifetime's hurt finds sudden and violent expression against a defenseless child.
The most serious offenders who do go on to kill, they work through what I call a type of script. So they will get the child in a position of control, and he will expect the child to participate. But then it will come to a critical point, and then if that child doesn't acquiesce to the sexual behaviour, the offender can turn very violent.
I forced her down, but this time I made sure she's on her back. She didn't want it, but I held her down. And the next thing I know, my hands around her neck with a cord, and I'm strangling her.
Whilst the intercourse is taking place, that's when you're strangling them?
Yeah.
Was that part of the enjoyment, Ron?
I don't know.
Be honest.
As I said, I was inside her, and I'm oversexed, but I'm not getting satisfaction.
Right.
I want more than satisfaction, but I ain't getting it.
What is the satisfaction you're looking for?
I don't know.
Even now?
Even though I still don't know what satisfaction I was looking for.
Right.
But I'm not getting pleasure. I'm just using her as a waste bin.